Turn my phone off.
Okay, so we are streaming away. Okay, and Rachel is here also.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, how you doing? Andrew Alexander.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Joe. Hi, everyone.
Okay, good. So, Rachel, I want you to know we've got quite a few people from, I think, from the Sephardic Chabra who are going to join us this Shabbat, the topic. And I'm going to put up my share screen. And you'll see my topic a little bit better in 1 second. Move this down, move this down, move this down. And you can see from the picture our topic for this Shabbat. That is a famous painting by Delacroix, the Jewish bride. And the topic is the bride and the lemon tree. It is a perspective on Sephardic music, Jewish music, in particular from Morocco, with Judith Cohen. So I put this in the background for us. And then I wanted to open up with a story and a song. With a story and a song for you. Some of you may have, it's been played around a lot, so you may be familiar with it. It is a Ladino song, Cuando Rey Nimrod. And if you know some Spanish, it's not that hard to decipher between the Spanish and Ladino. Let's see what's coming in. 4439. That's Karen, right?
Barbara.
Okay. I got to get the number.
Hi, Barbara.
Karen ends in 550. I think so. That's it. Barbara Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. So we're opening up, just warming us up with a song for the theme. This Shabbat Torah portion is Vayera, and it is about Abraham and the people of Sodom and the offering of Isaac. But I'm going back to a song that has to do with famous legend about Abraham's birth. It is in rabbinic sources going back 2,000 years, and it was turned into a popular Ladino song somewhere in the Middle Ages. It was first created maybe as a kind of Ladino tale, and then turned into a song about a century or so ago in Ladino, and became a big hit. And it is, if you see, I put the words up on the screen, and Cuando Rey Nimrod al Campo Salía. So my Spanish speaker there, Marcela, you can figure it out pretty well, probably, if you look at it. So King Nimrod is looking at the stars in the skies, and he sees a holy light in the Jewish quarter, Juderia. This is sort of funny because before there are any Jews, King Nimrod is seeing this light in the Jewish quarter, all right? Juderia. And the sign that Abraham was about to be born. So this is from the classic Midrash on the birth of Abraham. And the midwives are given instructions to kill every pregnant woman in the quarter, right? It's the Moses and the Nile story projected onto Abraham. And then the mother gives birth. She takes him to the woods, and he's a precocious child. As a baby, he's born already walking and talking, and he says, "Leave me, the angels will feed me." She comes back, and at the age of 20 days, he's already fully grown, and he's discovered God. And then Nimrod tries to throw him into the fiery furnace. He comes out of the furnace unburned, the Kivshana Esh, the burning fire. And then this is now tied in with song as a song for Brit Milah, because Brit Milah is also associated with Abraham. So those are the words of the song. And I'm going to play it now for us. Cuando Rey Nimrod. Many versions. Probably most famous is done by Yoram Gaon. but we have copyright problems. This beautiful couple here, Alon and Nani and Alon Sariel. Okay, so I see Sherry Schwartz came on from the Sephardic Chavara. You're probably familiar with this song. I introduced it just a second ago, the story behind it. And we'll have Judith Cohen on later on. I'm picking up music that will be typical of Sephardic Moroccan Jewish heritage, because that's what she's going to focus on. So that will be some of the musical theme for this Shabbat. We're going to open our service now with Shochen Ad, so you can all join in with me. Shochen Ad Maron V'Kadosh Shemo V'Chatuv Ranu Tzadikim Adonai La'Yisharim Nava Tehila V'Fi Yisharim Tithalal U'V'Divrei Tzadikim Titbarach U'V'Shon Chasidim Titramam U'V'Kerev Kedoshim Titkahadash U'V'Makalot V'Birot Amcha Beit Yisrael. We continue in the middle of the page. Yishtabach Shemcha La'ad Makeinu Mera Dodot Me'atav Yarolam Baruch Adonai Emel Gadol Batishbachot Elaudot Adonai Niflot Aboche B'Shir Ezihim Ramelech Echei Holamim. And we continue with the Baruch Hu. We have our minion online with us. Baruch Hu Et Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam V'ed V'cholam Yatzorech Hashech Osher Shalom U'borei Et HaKol. Continue now with Eladon, and I have this Eladon for us. Again, I'm trying to find music that reflects the flavor of today's theme.
Baruch u'mevorach גודלו וטובו מלא עולם דרד ותבונה כל העולם שמח בצאתם זזים בבואה עושים במה רצון הקונאם בכבוד נותנים לשמור צעול למדינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לה שקש ויזרעו ואבי זקים צורת הלבנה שבע נותנים לו כל צבע מרום תפארת וגדולה סרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש.
That's a very different arrangement. You can see a very different arrangement. This is Chazan Sasha Ozana from the other one that I had with Rabbi Basri did last week. It's the same melody, but you can see the different, it's much more slow, soft, lyrical at the beginning, and then turns into a march pace. So, same melody, same words, different feel as it's carried out. Let's go ahead then. And we continue the vision of the angels in heaven. Let's see.
Shema.
One second. Okay, some background noise. I don't know. Check. Okay. Maybe coming in on my system. I don't know. Okay. Give me 1 second.
Shema.
We'll go ahead with the service. The vision of the angels in heaven as they give their praise. וכולם מקבלים עליהם המלכות שמיים זה מזה ונותנים רשות זה לזה הקדיש ליוצרם ונחל ברוך ספנים והקדושה כולם כאחד בירה קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות ארץ כבודו אופנים וחיות הקודש ברעש ומתנשאים לעומת שרפים תם שבחים ואומרים ברוך כבר אדוני ממקום America. We continue the end of this prayer, which concludes the theme of the morning lights. Chadash, Hatzion Ta'ir, V'nizkechu lanu Mera li'oro Baruch Adonai. Bless you, the creator of the lights. And then we go to our new theme, then, which leads into the Shema. Shema is the love of God, and now our feeling of love with the giving of God's teachings, the Torah, to us, to our sages, and the interpretations. Ava Rabba, our great love. Amba Rabba Haftanu Adonai Eloheinu Chela V'Dolavitera Amad Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Ba'avur Avoteinu Shebatu Becha Avinu Malkeinu V'Tilamdeim Chukei Chaim Ein Techaneinu Tlamdeinu Avinu Avarachamon Amrachem Rachem Aleinu Betem B'Libeinu Lehavin Le'askil Lishma Lilmod U'Lilamed Lishma V'Lasot Olekayem Ekol Divrei Talmud Toratecha B'Ahava V'ha'erinenu B'Toratecha V'dahabek Libeinu B'mitzvotecha V'yachei Levaveinu Li'ahava U'lirat Shemecha V'lo nevosh Le'olam Moed V'lo nevosh Le'olam Moed Ki b'shem Kodshecha Agadol v'Anorah Nagilah v'nishmecha Nagilah v'nishmecha b'shuatecha Avienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolicheinu kamemiyot le'artzeinu E'p'yishot ha'tovanu v'chata mekalam v'lashon E'rafta l'shem ha'gadol Selah Selah be'emet Lehododecha U'yachecha b'yahava Baruch atah Adonai Avochenu Moiseh b'yahava. We're going to continue with the Shema, and we're going to go with this rendition of the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. והיה אם שמוע תשמעו אל מצוותיי אשר אנוכי מצווה אתכם היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיכם ולעבדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם, ונתתים את ארצכם בעיתו יורה ומלקוש, ואספת דגניך ותירושך ויצהריך, ונתתי עשב בשדך לבהמתך, ואכלת ושבעת. הישמרו לכם בין יפתי לבבכם, וסרתם ועבדתם אלוהים אחרים, והשתחוויתם להם, וחרה אף אדוני בכם, ועצר את השמיים, ולא יהיה מטר, והאדמה לא תיתן את יבולה, ועבדתם מהרה מעל הארץ הטובה אשר אדוני נותן לכם, ושמתם את דברי אלה על לבבכם ועל נפשכם, וקשרתם אותם לאות על ידכם, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניכם, ולימדתם אותם את בניכם לדבר בם, ושבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען ירבו ימיכם וימי בניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם, כי מהשמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם סיסית, הכנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על סיסית הכנף בתלתכת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם, ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים אלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
אדוני שפתי תפתח.
Second. Okay, we're going to continue now. Notice the chanting straight through in Sephardic tradition. The entire service is chanted by the Shaliach Tzibur, the Chazan, out loud. That is pretty fair rhythm. So in the end, they end around the same time as Ashkenazic service, where the Chazan puts the big emphasis on the completing phrases of each prayer, and the rest is done silently. Time-wise, we end up about the same length of time, which is almost forever with Jewish prayers. All right, let's go ahead now. We continue with the song of deliverance of the children of Israel at the shores of the Red Sea. We go from the command to love God to feeling God's care and guidance in history through the Exodus and the liberation from bondage. And we continue at the bottom of this page. Tilot le'eleha mevorach Moshe uvnei Yisrael harabav yamru chulam mi kamocha bo'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh norati lo ele Shema chadash shivchu geulim shemcha asefat hayam Shira chadash shivchu geulim asefat hayam yachad kulam hodu yachad kulam hodu So Yisrael, 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 Yodav Yisrael, Aleinu Adonai Tzivaot Shema, Kedosh Yisrael,
Adonai, Yisrael.
And now we're going to do the opening of the Mera, also with Rabbi Kadosh in the Moroccan style. And
ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים קונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לפני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיים את אימת הרב להושיע משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיים מתים רחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מחמוך בן גבורות ומיתו בלך מלך ממית ומחייב מצליח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
We're going to continue to the Kedusha. In the middle of the page here, Nekadeshim Chabalam, Keshem Shema Kishimata Bishme Makrom, Karatov, Ayan, Neviachar, Karazel Zeviyama, Osh Kadosh Kadosh, Aranai Tzivaot, Loretz Kivodo, Ozbeko Rash Gadol, Adiv Hazak Mashmim Kol, Et Nasim Lumatzer Rafim, Otamar Yomei, Ruborach Adonai, Mimeko Ho 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 Mo, Mimkom Ha Markeinu Tafia, Vitim Lachalenekim Hakim Anachnu Lach, Matai Timloch Betzion, Bekorvim Tishkon, It Gadal Betit Gadash,
לצורך ירושלים עירך לדור
ודור
ולנצח
נצחים
נצחים
בעינינו תראנה מלכותך כדבר בשירי עוזך על ידי דוד בשבתך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון דור ודור הללויה לדור ודור נגיד לך לנצח נצחים תשבחך נקדיש תשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אדוני האל הקדוש. I'm going to go ahead and chant through softly. On meditations. Yes, Oh, Kilo, כולם יברח. Amidah Chesed. Baruch Adonai Tishmachane Halo.
Baruch Adonai Baruch HaMashuach Bashalom.
Baruch Adonai. Amen. Okay, and now we're going to go back to reprise of two parts out of the Amidah. The first one, Yismach Moshe. Moses shall rejoice in his portion, his lot, as the faithful servant of God. And this one led by Jamar, one of the great
לא אשכח את התחרויות של יום שישי אצלנו בכיתה, במקהלה של בית הספר, מי ישיר קול יותר גבוה, בסול יותר ארוך, את השיר הבא.
So who could sing the song with the highest pitch?
במתנת חלקו היי במתנת חלקו ומה קראת לו עבד נאמן קראת לו קראת לו עבד נאמן קראת לו
people of Zura.
יש לה קרחת גדולה.
איפה הכוח שהיה לפני 40 שנה? במתנת חלקו, במתנת חלקו. ומה נתת לו כתר בראשו נתת לו, נתת לו, נתת לו
כתר בראשו נתת לו, נתת לו, נתת לו.
ישמח משה.
Okay. John Mara is joking in the middle, and he's saying, where's the power that I had in my voice 40 years ago? Still pretty clear voice. John Mara, the co-singer with him was Arvia Medina. So another section from the Amidah is the Birkat Kohanim, which we usually don't say. We don't do full repetition. We don't have any Kohanim, unfortunately, with us anymore. So we really don't get to it. But let me pull it up. And this very lovely Birkat Kohanim.
Adonai Veishmerecha Yael Adonai Panav Elecha Adonai Lecha Shalom
Notice this is Akin style. The Birkat Kohanim, when you listen to the Kohanim, the traditional Ashkenazic synagogue or the Sephardic synagogue, there's a similarity in the tone and the style, which I think indicates the antiquity of the melody being shared by Kohanim across the centuries and across the miles. So we're going to go now to our study.
Kaddish.
Go into that. Going to do our little bit of study. Finally, Pirkei Avot. There we go. We're going to get the last line of Hillel. We've been stretching out Hillel for weeks and weeks. And the very last line on this, Altamar Lichshe Efne Eshne, right? Hillel, I'm going to give you the translation here, so you believe me. All right, here we go. Hillel likes to do everything, as I've mentioned many times, in very short, pithy statements, and a lot of plays on words, plays on the tongue. The Lichshe Efne Eshne, which says, when I will have time, I will study. Efne Panui, when I'll have free time, then I'll study. Eshne Shema Lo Tifne, right? Because the odds are you'll never get to it. That's his warning, right? What do anybody know this in German? Morgen und ich heute sagen alle fallen Leute. I don't know if any Yiddish also. Tomorrow, not today, say all the lazy people. Or do not put off till tomorrow what you can do today, right? And in particular, he'll saying in terms of study, learning. Learning is a lifetime activity. Don't wait till you're retired to get to it. Don't wait till you're a wealthy man and you have servants to do work for you to get to it. Do, right, on a regular basis, which is a theme that the rabbis say elsewhere in Pirkei Avot. Kvayitim, the Torah set up a fixed time to study, to learn. You deepen your horizons, you deepen your faith, you understand what you are doing, you gain wisdom, right? Judaism is not a religion of sudden inspiration coming down from the heavens. It's something that's worked on. And our brains are part of that religiosity. The brains have to be worked on by learning. That is how we look at achieving sanctity. So those are Hillel's teachings for us. I say we stretched it out, a few more he's got in here. We'll follow them later on. All right, we're going to go into the Kaddish de Rabbanan. Let's recite those who are reciting more this Kaddish. Join with me. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma divrach chirutei, Be'amlich barchutei, B'chayachon, Be'amechon, Chayei b'chol Beit Yisrael, Bar Galav Zman Kariv, Imru Amen. Hei Shmei Rabon Borach, Olam Omer Maya, Yiborach, Vishtabach, Vipa'ar, Vitomar, Vitnaseh, Vithadar, Vitalev, Vitapal, Shemei Vikucha, Berichu, Le'ela Mikol, Birchata, V'shirata, Tush B'chata, V'nechemata, Damyam Be'alma, Vimru Amen. Al Yisrael Ba'al Rabbanan, Ba'al Tamidei our call Tamidei Tamidei our call Man Doskim B'Oraita, Div Ata Hadein V'Div V'Chol Ata V'Ata, Yehei L'Hon L'Chon Shlom Rabba, China V'Chis Rachmin, Hayin Arichim Zon Eviche, Pekorim Mekorim Vuhon Div Ishmaya, V'Imru Amen. Yehei Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, Hayim Aleinu V'Koysim V'Yomein, Ose Shalom B'Mamar, Oyase Shalom Aleinu V'Kol Yisrael, V'Imru Amen. And so we welcome everybody here. A reminder, this Shabbat brought to you by Hollywood Temple Bethel. Support your local synagogue and your international synagogue, Hollywood Temple Bethel. We come to our Torah service, back to our chapel, at least virtual chapel. We're going to continue.
Ein kamocha.
Ein kamocha. We open the ark. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai v'ein k'masecha chut chamachut kol olamim omem shal b'chol dor Adonai melech
Adonai Melech,
Adonai
Melech
Olam Va'ed,
Adonai
Adonai
Oz
Oz Le'amo Yitain, Adonai Yivarech Et Amo B'Shalom, Av HaRachamim, Eitiv V'Birtzoncha Es Zion, Timnecha Mo Yerushalayim, Timnecha Mo Yerushalayim, Ki V'cha Levabatachnu Melech Eram Benisa Adon Olamim. He ben Saharon Vayomer Moshe Oma Adonai Be'afutzo Evecha Be'anusu Mesanecha Ipanecha Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah Udevar Adonai Mirushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kiddush HaTol. All right, continue the prayer in front of the ark together. Belishmei Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatush Bechan Be'anarachet Belishmei Kadisha Yakira Ana Amatush Bechan Yeherava Kadama Tiftach li Bioraita Betashlim Mishalin Delibi Beliba Decholamach Yisrael Letavu Chayin Belishlam Amen. And we take the Torah from our virtual Torah, from our virtual ark. We chant the Shema responsively. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Repeat. Shema Yisrael, Adonai. Go ahead.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad
Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo, and repeat.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadol Adonai, Ramama
Shemo Yachdav. And we march around in our seats. Lecha Adonai Hagedol Hagevora V'Hatiferet V'Netzach V'Hahod Ki Chova Shamayim U'Aretz Ki Chova Shamayim U'Aretz Lecha Adonai Amam Lacha V'Miknaseh L'Chol Rosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Ishtachavu L'Adam Raglav Kadoshu Romemu Adonai Eloheinu V'Ishtachavu L'Har Kadsho Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Okay, we now come to our Torah service, the portion of Vayera, which starts out with the visitors coming to Abraham to announce the birth of Isaac, and then the part that we actually read also later on Rosh Hashanah, the birth of Ishmael, then the birth of Isaac and the Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac on the altar. But in the middle is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom ve'Amorah, and really the two of the prime cities, the five altogether, which are involved in bestiality, well, not bestiality, sodomy, cruelty to strangers, hostility to strangers. That's their common theme. And God in the chapter number 18 says, I'm going to go down, Tza'akat Sodom v'Amorah, the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has come up to me. I will see Haket Tza'akatam. Is it really as the sounds and cries of violence are? And around this, there's so many midrashim which talk about, well, what is the nature of Sodom and Gomorrah? In the story, as we have it, it would seem that the key crime is that they want to abuse the two visitors that come to Lot, physically abuse them, sodomize them. That's where the term comes from. But that's not what the rabbis of the Midrash play on. They play rather on the abuse of the stranger, and the abuse of the poor and the powerless. And so there are whole numbers of stories. For example, they say in Sodom, the law was that if you had one ox, you served 1 day guarding the community oxen. If you had no oxen, you had to serve 2 days. All right? In other words, the wealthy abused the poor. If you crossed the Jordan River nearby with the ferry, you paid $1 dinar, $1. But if you waded across and you didn't want to take the ferry because you didn't have the money, then you have to pay 2. All right? So these are all stories of abuse. They also adopted things from Greek myths, the famous bed of Procrustes. The visitor would come. They had their guest bed in their hotel. If he was too long, they'd chop off his limbs. If he was too short, they would stretch him to fit. And then the final one, they said that's what really did it for God too much. Haket Tza'akata, her screams. It wasn't like her screams. And the stories of an orphan girl who gives some food to a poor stranger, wandering stranger, and they hear this, they grab her, they smear her with honey, leave her out in the fields, and the insects destroy her and devastate her. That's the scream that finally brings God down. So what is this in contrast to? It's in clear contrast to Abraham and Lot, who do everything to extend hospitality. And what it is telling us is that our traditions, as the Torah is being given to us, the Torah is already talking to people who are agricultural and urban, settled people of civilization, and people who have money, already have wealth, and reminding them, look, our roots are, you see those Bedouins in the desert? Those are our roots. So what do the Bedouins in the desert do to a guest? The rule is the guest comes to you 3 days and a third of a day, he must stay with you and must shelter him. Even if he's your deadly enemy, during that time, he is your guest. You protect him, even your enemy. And they explain why, because the wilderness is so dangerous and threatening that surviving the wilderness depends on trust and care for each other. Even when there's a fight, there's certain rules to the fight. And hospitality is one of them. And this idea of hospitality goes on into rabbinic literature, where to escort a guest, to take care of the guest, achnasat orchim, is still very valuable, right? It is built on this trust, creating trust between one another and care between one and another. And they're very afraid because in urban civilization, we tend to distrust each other. That's true also. In Bedouin civilization, there's a lot of distrust also. But there are rules within that. In urban civilization, it's one-on-one, can be very violent, we know it. And so this is that warning, that care, that trust across the bounds, even with strangers, we have to have that. So that is in a nutshell, the crime of Sodom and Gomorrah. So with that, of course, we'll go ahead then, start the Torah reading, and Joe, you're here. Joe 1 and Joe 2.
Both here.
The blessing, Joe 2, you'll do the reading for us. I have it on the screen in front of us. Go ahead.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch
Adonai Vorach L'olam Voed. Baruch Adonai Melech Olam. Asher Bocha Bonim Mikol Amim. V'natam Lanu es Torusoi. Baruch Adonai. Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayavo Shnei HaMelachim Sodom Ba'erev Velot Yoshev Bashar Sodom ויערלות ויקם לקראתם וישתחוו 2000 ארצה. ויאמר הננה אדוני סורו נא אל בית עבדיכם ולינו ורחצו רגליכם והשכמתם והלכתם לדרכיכם. ויאמרו לו כי ברחוב נלין ויבצור בם מאוד ויסורו אליו ויבואו אל ביתו ויעש להם ישתהו מצות עפה ויאכלו טרם ישכבו ואנשי העיר אנשי סדום נסבו על הבית מנער ועד זקן כל העם מקצה ויקראו אל לוט ויאמרו לו איה האנשים אשר באו אליך הלילה הוציאם אלינו ונדע אותם ויצא עליהם לוט הפתחה והדלת סגר אחריו ויאמר אל נא אחי תראו הננה לי שתי בנות אשר לא ידעו איש הוציאה נא אתן עליכם ועשו להן כטוב בעיניכם רק לאנשים האל אל תעשו דבר כי על כן באו בצל קורתי ויאמרו גשע לה ויאמרו האחד בר לגור וישפוט שפוט אתה נרא לך מהם ויפתרצו באיש בלוט מאוד וישקו לשבור הדלת וישלחו אנשים את הידם ויביאו אל לוט אליהם הביתה ואת הדלת סגרו ואת האנשים אשר פתח הבית היכו בצנוורים מקטון ועד גדול ויעלו למצוא הפתח.
Yeah, I'll just give you the English to it for a second. If we didn't have it, I'll give you the English here. Just so you can see the story here. Let me get this down. All right, and two men arrived in Sodom. You can see how he invites them, welcomes them in. I'll bathe your feet. No, we'll stay in the square, but he tells them to stay inside. It's not safe. The men come, and the townspeople, all of them gather, as you see, and they want the two guests. They want to rape the two guests, and he says, no, take my daughters. And they say, no, we're going to rape the guests. And what is in this is domination. If any of you know what happens in prisons, it is domination and humiliation. That's what's intended in this. That's what's behind it. And no, Lot protects his guests from that. And hence he is saved, his daughter and his daughters, his wife, and they're spirited out of the city by the angels. Now that is the story of Sodom. It's that humiliation of the stranger, the humiliation, the abuse of the one who is weak. That is what stands at the core. So we go ahead now with the prayer for the country and the prayer for Israel. And we've gone through the elections. Looks like it's decided for Biden, but it also looks like it was very much a split election in terms of the way the public went down, almost 50-50 on a lot of issues. And so I have this prayer for the country. It's written by Rabbi Naomi Levy, and I thought it's very appropriate. I think she put it together very well and expressed it in a way that I think we can all feel good with this. So let's go ahead. I'm going to read it with you. Our nation has chosen a new leader to guide us forward in this challenging time. Help us, God, to unite our great country in the wake of a contentious election. Teach us to listen to one another, to heal our divisions, and to restore hope. The days that lie before us will not be easy, but they are ours to shape. Let them be days of repair, days when we will stem the tide of this horrific pandemic, days when we'll join together to build a new future. For some of us, the results of this election are cause for great celebration. For others, the results are deep disappointment. Our charge today must be to rise above conflict, to rise above our differences, and welcome in a new time of understanding, a new time of caring and empathy, decency and support. Bless us, God, with ears to hear, hearts to love, and hands to reach across party lines, so that we can ensure liberty and dignity for all. Land of opportunity and dreams, we vow to protect our blessed democracy, to safeguard the freedom that is our birthright. We pledge our allegiance to every soul in need and every child praying for a better tomorrow. Bless America, God, with peace, prosperity, with justice for all. Amen.
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 Very valuable for us in our time. And let's join in with prayer for the people of Israel also. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I jumped ahead. Let's pray for those who are ill. I jumped ahead.
Yeah.
I forget anyone who is ill. I'm going to get the list up for us here. And then you'll add the Mishabeach Avotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. May you bless our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Bless and heal Esther Elisheva, Perseberg Soskovsky, Miriam Ben Leah Dorf, Yatsa Ben Galina, Moisey Kelchik, Mindy Levins Pfeiffer, Jennifer Levins, Ronnie Duran, Harriet Levins, Moise Ben Manya, Barbara Mormon, Esther Gerson, Joe Alexander, Robert Drato, Roger Rosen, Rachel Aflalo, Jenny Dratov, Michael Schinder, Susan Tuchman, Shirley Marco, Fiora Feinberg, Judy Alkali, Richard Zeller, Leben Masha Ben Sarah, Jason, Leba Batsara, Hannah Batsara, Eliyahu Ben Chana, Herb Mormon, Irina Hosepian, Alex Trebek, Shoshana Batsara, Hannah Sarah, Leah Bat Rachel, Hannah Sarah Bat Kaila Alta, Alan Whalen, and Hai Amnesty. Anyone please add names of those that you want?
Yehuda Noach
Ventura.
Oh, hold on. Let me get Joe first. Yeah.
Yehuda Noach ben David Yehuda David Mordcha ben Yehuda Noach.
David Mordcha ben Yehuda Noach.
Sima Harlev.
Sima Harlev.
Ronan Der Harlev.
Ronan Der Harlev.
Susan Feinberg.
Susan Feinberg.
Sharon Lipman.
Sharon Lipman.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
Esther Rachel Batsiva.
Laban Moshe Ben Sarah.
Laban Sarah.
And Shlomo Ben Lazar.
Shlomo Ben Lazar. Yeah, Rachel, now go ahead.
Rachel Bat Ventura.
Rachel Bat Ventura. Yeah?
Wendy Keller, please.
Oh, Wendy Keller. Okay, Marcella?
Ronald Rothman.
Ronald Rothman.
Julian Eisner.
Julian Eisner.
Tito and Gabi Gorodisha.
Tito and Gabi Gorodisha.
David Ben Hanalea.
David Ben Hanalea. Any other names? So we have them all in our hearts and in our thoughts. May the Holy One send them healing both in body and in mind to them and to the whole house of Israel. Let's all say Amen. And we'll join in our prayers together. And I found this one. I've been using it lately from Cantor Freund. I thought it's very well expressed, very well chanted. So we can join in with him.
שבירך אבותינו מקור הברכה לאבותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. And let's say Amen. Misheberach imotenu l'kol habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah Shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Okay. I've noticed our guest speaker has joined in. Come on board. Judith Cohen, welcome to you. Okay, we're going to wrap up our service shortly, and then we're going to turn the platform over to you. Welcome.
To go.
Shalom. And I sort of jumped out of line. I will start with the prayer for the United States before the Mishperach. We'll go ahead to the Haftarah. Just as the Torah portion, especially the part that we read on Rosh Hashanah, talks about the birth of Ishmael first. The threat to Ishmael, water is there is no more water, and all of a sudden there's water. And then we have the birth of Isaac, and he's almost dead. Right? Abraham is about to do the job, and God says no. So the rabbis looked for something similar. They looked in the story of Elisha, and they found side by side two stories that are very similar. The first one, a woman whose husband has died. He was a follower of Elisha, and they are in debt, and someone is going to take their children as payment for the debt. And he says, don't worry, take a bottle, fill it, and keep on filling and filling and filling. It'll be filled with oil, and suddenly there's plenty of oil. She sells the oil. There's no more debt, right? So that's instead of water, there's oil. But the idea is suddenly what there was nothing, there's plenty. So that's parallel number one. Then the next parallel is the Elisha goes ahead. There's a woman in Shunem, town of Shunem, very wealthy. She has no child. He prays, she has a child. And then all of a sudden, as the child gets a little bit older, the child falls dead.
Over here.
And Elisha comes in, comes to the child, prays for the child, and the child comes back to life. So there is that second parallel.
I want my name to appear at the bottom.
Okay, so that's our Haftarah.
Okay.
Okay, Arthur, welcome aboard.
Hi.
Good to see you. Arthur will be with us next week. All right, so I'm going to just chant the first lines of the V'isha achat min shnei bnei hanviim tzak Elisha lemor avdecha ishi met v'ata yadata ki avdecha haya yarei et Adonai v'anu sheba lekachat et shnei yeladav lo lavadim.
Don't do this on this, please. Here.
ויאמר אליה אלישע מה אעשה לך הגיד לי מה יש לכי בבית ומשלח בבית ותמען ושפחתך כל בבית כי אם אסוך שמן ויאמר לכי שאלין לך כלים מן החוץ מאת כל שכנייך כלים ריקים אל תמעיטי ובאת וסגרת הדלת בעדך ובעד בנייך ויצקת על כל כלים אלה המלא תעשיי ותלך מיתו תסגור הדלת בעדה ובעד בניה הם מגישים אליה והיא מצקת ויהי כמלות הכלים ותאמר בנה הגישה אלי עוד כלי ויאמר אליה אין עוד כלי ויעמוד השמן ותבוא ותגיד לאיש האלוהים ויאמר לכי מכרי את השמן ושמי את נשייך וארתו ונייך יחי ובנותיו. So that is our reading for the Haftarah. Right? They sell the oil, miracle of the oil, and they're all saved. Now we come, okay, I'm going to go back in my order of business now to we did the prayer for the country, back now for the people of Israel and the state of Israel. We hope and pray that the new government will maintain good, positive relations with Israel. President Biden has a long-standing good history with Israel, so we hope that policy will continue. And we join in on prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Sheba Shamayim Lo Yisrael Begalo Barech Et Medinat Yisrael Shitmicha Gulateinu Again Aleha Bevra Chazdecha Aleha Sukat Shalom Slacharcha B'Amicha Losher Sareh Yatzeha Taknem Beitzah Tova Milchonecha strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Avinu Sheba Shamayim Lo Yisrael Begalo bless the land and its inhabitants with everlasting joy. and triumph them with everlasting peace. And let us say, Amen. Carmen, if you're on the line somewhere, if you can send me a copy, if you find it somewhere, the English to the Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, so I can put it up, because the song doesn't work with the words as we have it in here. And I cannot find it anywhere with that English text. Good, and let's continue now. We're going to return the Torah to the ark. Hallelujah, Shema Adonai, Kinskach Shema Levado, Hodo Aleretz V'Shamayim, Vayarem Kerem Le'amot Tehila Alecha Chasidav, Ivnei Yisrael Ankrovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. And we switched the melody. His mother David. Havul Adonai b'nei Elim. Havul Adonai b'nei Elim. Havul Adonai kivod ha'oz. Havul Adonai kivod Shema. Ishtach Havul Adonai b'hadar kodesh. Kol Adonai Ahamayim Elayim Kvod Yirim. Kol Adonai Ba'koach. Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shomer arazim, V'shaber Adonai et azeh havanon, V'yarkidem kema egel levanon b'Sirion. Kol Adonai hotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai mebakadesh, Kol Adonai yecholel ayalot, Vayechesov Yeharot Hechalon Kulo Omek Adonai Lamavu Yeshev Adonai Melech Leolam Adonai Oz Le'amoyiten Adonai Yevarech Amo Vashalom. I apologize for being somewhat off key in background. I just escaped.
I don't know. I saw your name here.
Okay. There we go. Watch the microphones, please, because it's picking up everything. I would join in as we turn the Torah to the ark. Eitz Ahayim hi lamachzikim ba'beton heha meushar deracheha lacheino b'chol netivoteha shalom ashireinu Adonai Elech Nashova Hadesh Yameinu. We're going to wrap up. So we come to Enke Eloheinu, and I'm going to invite again this classic thing. Enke Eloheinu, Yomar.
There you're on, don't worry.
Mi Kelohenu, mi Adonenu, mi Malkenu, mi Moshi'enu. Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkenu, Nodel Moshi'enu. Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshi'enu. Atah Eloheinu, Atah Adonenu, Atah Malkeinu, Atah Moshi'enu. Atah Toshi'enu, Atah takum terachem Zion, ki'ed lehennena.
Everyone, right? Everyone?
Maybe click on it and you'll get on.
No,
Okay,
I
and
know.
we'll all join in
I don't know how.
the Alena together. Alena l'shabach ladon
Hakol,
hakol, make it
says
all
to
say
do
breshit.
Bereshit,
Kelos
no,
anke haratzot, lo
V'chol
samanu
Samanu
kishmechat adama,
Adama,
Kelo
From
samchakenu
Chalkeinu
kohem,
Gohem,
v'gor
V'gor
aleinu
Aleinu
kechohamonam, v'anachnu
V'anachnu
kolim,
Kolim
u'mishtachavim
Mishtachavim
u'modim,
Moedim
לפני מלך מלכי
Malachei
המלכים
Amlachim
הקדוש ברוך
HaKadosh
הוא
Baruch Hu
כהונות השמיים ויסר
V'yosed
הארץ
Aretz
משה
U'Moshe
ויקרא
V'yikora
בשמיים
B'Shamayim
ממעל
Mimal
ושכינתו
U'Shchinatu
זו
Zov
ושכינתו
U'Shchinatu
זו
Zov
בגבי
Orei
מרומים
Meromim Hu
ואלוהינו
Elohim
ואינו הם
Ein
ממכנו אפס ונתן
Kakadu
ככתוב בתורתו
Betorata
ידעת
Yedata
היום
Yom
להשיבות
Hashivate
אל
El
לבביך כי
Ki
אדוני
Adonai
הוא
Hu
אלוהים
Elohim
בשמיים
Bashamayim
ממעל
Imal
ועל
Yal
הארץ
Aretz Mitachat Ein
מתחתינו
Oy Ein Oy
עוד.
Al Kanekavahu.
And we continue the last line, which I don't really have here. Remember it. Nema
Oya Adonai
Lemelech
al kol haaretz
Bayom Hahu
Bayom Hahu
Ye
Adonai
Echad Ushemo
Moho Ushemo Shemo Echad. I'll go to Mornus Kaddish.
Continue with the Mornus Kaddish. And this, Joe, Alexander, this Shabbat I see is the yard site of Riva's mother. Riva Sherman. Yes, okay. So please let Riva know that we have her name here.
Yes.
We're also coming up on November 9th, which is the date of Kristallnacht, the night of shattered glass. The great riots and attacks on the Jews in Germany and Austria that was, we may say, the beginning of the beginning of history. So we have in our minds the victims of that horrible period in Jewish and world events. And we also recalled those who passed away this year, Harry Kyle and Davis Wenker, Jack Petsko, and also Irina Derry, mother of a dear friend of ours, and Mike Rogeson, brother of a dear friend of ours. May the memories be for a blessing. And I'll say amen.
Rabbi, did you mention Remembrance Day coming up?
On November 11th?
Yes, Remembrance Day.
That will be coming
Thursday.
Thursday. So we call in mind the veterans, those who fell the wars. You know, it's sad. It's sad in some sense because these significant events are sort of passed off. When it comes to that was to recall the end of World War I, originally Armistice Day, World War II. So we honor all those who fell on behalf of freedom and liberty within the United States, Allied forces, and all those who fought for human decency and dignity. I mean, thank you for reminding us, Carmen. And so now we recite together the one is Kaddish, which you have on the screen in front of us. Yitkadal,
Shmei Rabbah.
Yamad Yivrachirutei, Yamlich Malchutei, B'chayachon v'yamichon, V'chayei l'chol Beit Yisrael, B'agalav Zman Kariv Imru Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabbo Mevorach, V'olam Omer Maya, Yiborach, V'yishtabach, V'yipo'ar, V'yitumar, V'yitnasei, V'yithadar, V'yitalev, V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudsha Berichu, Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata damyon be'alma v'imru amen Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'akoyse v'amen Ose shalom v'imroma Uyase shalom aleinu v'akoyse v'imru amen. May the one who makes peace to them above grant peace to us and to all Israel and to the whole world, and let's all say amen. And the Shabbat brought to you again, Hollywood Temple Bethel, give us your factual support. You may send donations in memory of someone or in honor of someone or just for feeling good to our regular address or through PayPal, temple@hcbl.org. It'll come in. And to go ahead, just to wrap up before we come to our program, I'm going to open up the screen just a second here for us all. Today we have Dr. Judith Cohen. I'm going to introduce her in a second. And next we're going to have Arthur Ben-Benisti, who's joined in. He's going to be talking about the crypto Jews, which is not from the word kryptonite, but I wonder if the author of the Superman comics had some of these things in his mind, because he also gave them all them on the original planet of Superman Hebrew ending name. So who knows what he had in mind. Crypto Jews, hidden Jews, Jews who disappeared for 400 years from our sites and suddenly appear again. By the way, this week, apparently Portugal gave citizenship to 20,000 Jews of Portuguese ancestry. All right, so I might run claim. I can come up with some excuse and get Spanish maybe. That's an idea. Right? I can get Portuguese. I can get not Portuguese. I can get Polish, Austrian, or German. I could get it, but I don't want it. I'm happy with this. So, and then after that, so that's the 14th. On the 21st, I've set up to have Richard Hirschhaupt, who's been with us before for Rosh Hashanah, and also we have the Shabbat with Pastor Fisher. And we'll talk about the new survey that the American Jewish community did on attitudes of anti-Semitism, about anti-Semitism among Jews and non-Jews in the United States. And maybe by then, we may be able to have a little bit of a postmortem on the elections and some of why people voted the way they did. We'll find out as we get closer. That's going to be very, very, very interesting. That's coming up to 20. Let's go Adon Olam. And again, I'm looking always for something a little, the flavor in our service for the scene. And so I have Enrico Macias. Now our theme is more Moroccan. Macias is Algerian, but I don't think we're going to be picky about it. This is, let me go back. There you go. Ahead, hold on. And Adon Olam. No, I'm sorry, it's not Adon Olam. Actually, we're going to sing Yigdal first. I'm sorry, and I don't have it in front of us. But you know the word Yigdal.
Yigdal.
And Judith, you'll explain to us the instrument.
If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happy to have to wear steamers. For no reasons. Vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. I can't breathe. That wasn't just George Floyd. A lot of people felt they couldn't breathe. Every day you're waking up, you're getting these tweets, and you just.
Je vais respecter une tradition. Je vais vous interpréter un chant religieux accompagné par de la musique arabo-andalouse.
יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח נמצא בין עתים מציאותו אחד ואין יחיד כאיחודו נעמל וגם אין סוף לאחדותו דמות הגוף ונוגו לא נערוך אליו קדושתו אדמון לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון ואין ראשית לראשיתו יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח נמצא בין עתי מציאותו אדון עולם לכל נוצה יורה גדולתו ומלכותו שפע נבואתו ניתנו אל אנשי סגולתו בתפארתו יגדל אלוהים וישתבח נמצא בין עתי מציאותו יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח נמצא בין עתי מציאותו
Okay, I see that it really got some of you up and dancing to the rhythm. All right, very good. So listen, here's our theme. I'm going to shut down, but I put The Bride by Delacroix, the Jewish Bride, and the theme is the Bride and the Lemon Tree. I think that's it. We're going to do the stop share 1 second. And Judy, where's Judy?
Judith.
Judith, you're on here. There you are. Okay, yeah, now I see you. And we can see everybody on the screen.
So I need to ask you to let me share the screen.
That's right.
So I think I have to be co-host or something.
That's right. Here we go. It's all yours. 1 second. Let's see.
Okay.
And
great. So I'll just say hi, and then I'll start.
Okay, it shows that you're set, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. It's all yours.
Hi. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.
Sure. Can I introduce you?
Sure. And maybe we can ask people who have forgotten to mute their mics if they can mute them, because I see a few are open.
So I'm going to introduce you, Dr. Judith Cohen. You are ethnomusicologist, which in plain English, you study music of the people. We call it usually folk music. Is that the correct phrase?
No, ethnomusicology can study any kind of music at all. It's people and musicology.
People and the music.
It can be people doing anything. It can be in an Amazonian rainforest. It can be in a discotheque.
Okay. Oh, good. I can go disco and Sam folk dancer. Good folk music. Good. So, and you're at you teach at York University in Toronto. Where we've got one Toronton here. That's Carmen, and I have a cousin in Toronto. So we've got our Toronto connection. Okay, let's go ahead. Why don't you go ahead, please?
Okay. So, hi everybody. I was thinking that just this time last year, I was a few weeks away from heading to LA. Actually, first to San Diego for a conference from here in Canada, and then to LA to see my cousins and my friend Art, who's, well, I mean, if I point to you where you are in my screen, it's not going to look as if I'm pointing to you where you really are, but you get the idea. And here we are, you know, all these months and months later, and I hope I get back to LA some other time really soon. But for now, I'll just share my screen with you and we'll start. Let's see. And share computer sound. Yes. Okay, can you see everything?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah? Everything okay? So this is the song you were mentioning. As you can see, I used exactly the same picture that you did. Everybody uses that picture of Delacroix, of the Moroccan bride. But this is actually in California, not in LA, but in San Francisco. My old group, Jerry Neldo, back in '93 with the late Judy Frankel. And I'll sing you a little bit of that song just so we can start off with the song. So underneath the lemon tree is the bride. Okay, and it says she's putting her feet into the cold water, and her beloved comes up and says, "What can I give you? What can I do for you?" And it's just a pretty happy wedding song. Debajo de limón la novia, sus pies en el agua clara, su amor por ahí pasará, que Aziz mi novia galana, esperando a vos mi alma, debajo de limón la novia. So we're gonna have some background. This is kind of what I think of as the prelude. It's a few basics. And the first thing I'm going to do is demystify two very common myths. One is that Sephardic songs are medieval. They're not. And one is that they're flamenco, or flamenco is from Sephardic music, or they're somehow related, and they're actually not. So the way it works is, at the moment, the earliest known actual music notation of Sephardic or Ladino folk songs only goes back to the late 19th century, the 1880s. And the earliest recordings that we have go pretty far back. They go back to 1906 or so in today's Turkey, and the 1950s in Morocco. But before that, anything about music is really speculative. We really just don't know. Some of the oldest lyrics, some of the oldest texts, okay, the words of the old narrative ballads, and some of the words of the old wedding songs, they do go back to before the expulsion, or just around it, or just after it, but we don't know what music went with them. And some of the stories are even older. Some of the old narrative ballads have stories that go back to, 1001 Nights, but again, not the music. Most of the popular Ladino songs that people know, that they hear all the time, Adiós querido, querida, and Yo me enamoré de un aire, and all these are late 19th century or early 20th century songs. And we know a lot about medieval Sephardic poets. We know a lot about their poetry. We have their poetry, mostly in Hebrew or Arabic. We know all about the existence of medieval Iberian Jewish musicians. We know just about everything about them except the music. So you see over here on the left, these two guys playing the harp. This is from the 13th century, and it's from the manuscript of the Songs to Mary of King Alfonso X in Spain. We know they're Jewish because of their little triangular hats. They were mandated. And we know that King Alfonso had Jewish and Muslim and Christian musicians all together in his court. But he assembled them to play the music he told them to play, which was the songs to Mary, to the Virgin Mary. We don't know what they played in their off time. We don't know if they got together and jammed, and if the Christian and Muslim and Jewish musicians traded tunes and traded songs, probably, but we just don't know. And flamenco is a whole other story. Flamenco and Sephardic songs share some musical characteristics. They share vocal qualities and vocal ornamentation, but these are found really all around the Mediterranean. And flamenco itself, as we know it, isn't even that old. It's maybe 150, 200 years old. Most of the well-known Sephardic songs developed in the diaspora from Spain, not in pre-expulsion Spain. And when the Gitanos, we try not to use the word gypsies anymore, but when the Gitanos, or as we call them, the gypsies, they don't say Roma in Spain. When they arrived in Spain, it was long before, it was centuries before flamenco developed. And the Jews had only a few decades left there before the 1492 expulsion. They really only coincided for a few decades. Most of the Jews had long been gone from Andalusia after the pogrom in Seville in 1391. So flamenco probably has more connection with the Moriscos, the Muslims converted to Christianity, who were closer to the Gitanos' social economic class. And then on the left, just a little note about what the language is called, because there's a lot of confusion about that too. So is it Judeo-Spanish? Is it Ladino? What is it called? So in Morocco, Sephardim, depending where in Morocco they live and who their ancestors are, they speak French, almost all of them. They might speak Arabic or Darija, which is Moroccan Arabic. They might speak Amazigh or Tamazigh or Berber, depending on whether they're Berber Jews. And among those descended from Spain and Portugal, they speak Haketia, and also Standard Spanish, but with a modified pronunciation. So they typically reserve the term Ladino for its original meaning, which is literal translation from Hebrew. So Halayla Hazeh, the night, the this, la noche, la esta. But you wouldn't speak that way. You can write that way, pray that way, sing that way, but you would say esta noche, not la noche, la esta, just the way you would say this night, not the night, the this. These days, however, just about everybody is saying Ladino because we have the Autoridad Nacional del Ladino y su Cultura in Israel, and so Ladino is really pretty much the accepted name, and Haketia really still for the spoken language in Morocco. So just again, a bit of background. Sorry about all the words, but can't really understand the songs unless we know what's going on behind them. So there's only a few thousand Jews in Morocco today, maybe up to 3,000, and that's out of hundreds of thousands who lived there for 2 millennia. When the Jews of Sepharad, of Spain and Portugal, when they began to arrive in Morocco, which was well before 1492, they found many Jews already living there for centuries. And those who left Morocco in the mid-20th century, in the 1950s, 1960s, they moved to Israel, they moved to French Canada, my hometown, Montreal. They moved to France, Venezuela, and elsewhere. Of the small remaining Jewish population in Morocco, the majority, almost all of them, live in Casablanca, okay, which is right over here. Can you see my arrow on the coast? In Casablanca, with very small communities in the capital, Rabat, in Fez, which isn't on the map, but it's about here, Meknès, Marrakesh, and down in Agadir on the beach. And very, very, very few, this little pink bit is the former Spanish protectorate. That was from 1912 to 1956. Tetuan in the Spanish protectorate used to be Little Jerusalem, or Jerusalem of the West, and there's no Jews left there at all, to my knowledge. There's maybe 30 or 40 at the most in Tangier, most of them elderly, and none in the remaining towns. So this is just a blow-up of this little pink bit. Okay, this is a bigger blow-up of it so you can see. Really, they mostly lived, the Spanish part was mostly here. So here's the tip of Spain, Gibraltar, Algeciras, Tarifa, and here's Tangier, Ceuta, which is Spanish, all the way over east, Melilla, which is also Spanish, and then just down here, Tangier, Tetuan, Arzila, Larache, which is one of my favorite towns, and I talk about it a lot, Alcazar Quibir, or Ksar al-Kibir, Wazan, Shawen, and that's really about it. It's just this little pink tip over here. But King Hassan II, the king of Morocco, is very friendly to the Jews, and so is his father, King Mohammed V. And the association Mimuna promotes friendly activities, very, very active among Jews and Muslims. André Zulay, he's this man down at the bottom here. With his wife, they're the last Jews in the town of Essaouira, down sort of around here. He's senior advisor. So a Jewish man is senior advisor to the king of Morocco, as he was to his father, the king before him. He's been instrumental in preserving the Jewish legacy of Morocco, and now the history of the Jews in Morocco will be taught in the schools as of last week in Morocco. This is huge. It's really amazing. And his daughter, by the way, is Adria Zulay, the Director General of UNESCO. Just for those of you who didn't realize that. Instruments. So we heard some beautiful instrumental playing that you chose. That was great. Rabbi Weinberg, thanks so much for this. The only instrument that you really need for Sephardic music is your voice. You can play anything you like. There's no forbidden instruments. But it's not like klezmer where you have a separate instrumental repertoire that doesn't have words. There's no nigunim. You can hum. You can do whatever you like. You can hum a song without words. You can make up a tune. You can play an instrument. But it doesn't have that whole separate repertoire. So all you really need is your voice. Especially for weddings, women usually played frame drums like Julia Ederi up here with her tambourine. Their hands were typically too occupied with domestic work and taking care of the children to practice melody instruments. So they often played the frame drums for weddings, for festive occasions. Typically, Sephardim play instruments of whatever culture they live in. So in Morocco, mostly the oud. Okay, you can see it, or you can see my oud here. I'm not going to play it today because it's really out of tune, and I just didn't have time during the day to tune it up. The oud, the kanun that we heard that beautiful recording of. The violin either played upright, as in this photo here, or the way you usually see it, and related North African bowed string instruments that the violin developed from, actually. Darbuka, here's a small darbuka. And often in Morocco, you actually see, I meant to dig up a medieval picture, I forgot. You see the sort of long, skinny one that you hold over your shoulder. You don't hold it on your lap. And this you'll actually see in a couple of pictures in the Middle Ages. In Morocco, the bendir, the big frame drum that you see here on the bottom left, it was not played by men on stage until a Jewish singer, Chaim Botbol, this man right here, introduced it in the 1960s. Until then, it was considered a folk instrument or a women's instrument and not for a stage concert. And he changed that. Chaim Botbol actually changed that. And this was his brother, who was a singer and violinist, Marcel Botbol. He died of COVID in April, this past April. Both performed with their father in this picture, Jacob Botbol. Legendary singer and oud player, Samil Maghribi, or Samuel Amzalag. He was actually my oud teacher for a little while in the early 1980s. He was a Hazan, and he also composed and sang in Arabic. And his colleague, this is relevant to Los Angeles, his colleague Selim Azra was a master of the kanun, and Selim Azra also taught me oud, but his son Henri is a kanun master who lives in LA, in Los Angeles. So if you want really, really good kanun, Moroccan style, Moroccan Jewish kanun playing in LA, this is Henri down here at the bottom right. And just a picture, there's not that many women in public, but Zohra El-Fassia was Morocco's first female recording artist, and she was, of course, a Jewish woman, a revered Jewish woman singer. So Moroccan Sephardic women, men too, but especially women, they continued to sing the old narrative ballads. When I say a narrative ballad, I mean a song that tells a story, not ballad in the sense of a kind of love song, but ballad in the sense of what happened. This happened. He got on his horse. He galloped off. He picked up his sword and cut off a couple of heads. He won the election. He lost the election. Okay, a ballad tells a story. And wedding songs. And so the Moroccan women kept singing these old ballads and these old wedding songs about sort of a generation and a half or 2 generations, even longer than most of the Sephardic women in the Ottoman region. There's a lot of reasons for that, but just to keep things short, they did. So most of the top 10 Ladino hits, and I keep saying this so that it's clear, most of the sort of top 10 Ladino hits that you all hear and we all love are not found in Morocco. They appeared in today's Turkey, Greece, and the Balkans in the mid to late 19th century or even later. But many of the older genres, the ballads and the wedding songs, share texts across the Mediterranean with different tunes. So you have the same text in Morocco and in Izmir or Istanbul or Salonika, but different tunes. Or sometimes you don't. They're just different altogether. So there are 5 main genres. The romance, which is the narrative ballad that I've been talking about, and mostly women sang these while they were doing things with their hands, while they were working at home. Some of them are used as wedding songs or as laments also. Life cycle songs, so these are mostly wedding songs, but of course songs for every stage of life. Calendar cycle and other Jewish-related songs. They can be about Shabbat, they can be about famous rabbis, they can be about even making Aliyah, so 20th century songs, early songs for the 1920s, 30s about making Aliyah. Sometimes they're macaronic, they use more than one language in one song, usually Hebrew and Ladino. And typically they're in the form of coplas, which are couplets, assonant rhyme couplets. And then the canticas, these are the ones you've mostly heard. You don't hear many of these in Morocco. And these are your love songs, your topical, satirical, parody, social commentary. The ones that do exist in Morocco are well known among Moroccan Jews, but not well known outside. They haven't been recorded much. And then finally, newly composed songs with known composers. Again, The ones from Morocco are pretty local. People don't usually know them, so I just put in a picture of Flori Jagoda, who is, of course, from Bosnia, not from Morocco, but she's the emblematic composer of new Sephardic songs. And this is my old group, the black and white picture here. We were last in LA as a group back in, I think, 92 or 93 or something, a long time ago. And you'll hear more from us. So, the romance. Here's the tech part. This is the last really technical part. So it's either pronounced romance, or if you want to be like modern Spanish, romance, with that lisp. It's not the romanza, although they were once synonymous. Romanza is too often used today to mean romantic song, just the way ballad used to be always a narrative song, but now is often used in the sense of a love song. So I just always add the word narrative. The romancero, people try and get fancy sometimes, and they say, oh, she sings lots of romanceros. No. The romancero is a corpus of romances, a collection. Okay? A romance, and this is the most technical part, is a narrative song with an indefinite number. It can have 4 lines, it can have 100 lines. An indefinite number of assonant lines, so they're going to end in a, or a, or e. The consonant doesn't matter. Typically, not always, of 16 syllables each in 8-syllable hemistichs. Isn't that good? You can use that as your, your Trivial Pursuit question. So it goes like this. The Ballad of Gerineldo, or in modern Spanish, Gerineldo, and this was the name of my old group. Gerineldo, Gerineldo. That's 8. Mi caballero pulido, quien te me diera esta noche 3 horas en mi servicio. And I'll sing a little bit of it so you see how that works. So any tune that works with that metrical scheme will work for any ballad of the same metrical scheme. This is not a Sephardic instrument. It's a copy of a medieval bowed fiddle, but the Jews of medieval Spain, along with the Christians and everyone else, played it. But it's not, I'm just using it because it's handy and it works better than a corded instrument like a guitar for these old songs. Gerineldo, Gerineldo, mi caballero pulido, quien te me diera esta noche 3 horas en mi servicio. Como soy vuestro criado, señora, burláis conmigo. Yo no burlo, Gerineldo, que de veras te lo digo. So it's a song with a happy ending or a not so happy ending, depending on which ending is used. The actual narrative, the story is very, very old, about 1,000 years old. Gerineldo is the king's page. The king's daughter falls in love or in lust with him. She invites him to her bed. The king discovers him, and he offers to marry them to each other because he doesn't want to avenge his honor by killing them because he likes them. So in the happy version, they accept and they get married, and we say, may you have the mazal of Gerineldo. And that's why my group was called Gerineldo. And in the not so happy, the original version, actually, Gerineldo says, so sorry, king, thanks a lot, but I've sworn an oath to only marry a virgin and your daughter doesn't qualify as of last night. So I said ballads and bingo here because Montreal's Club Sepharad d'Âge d'Or, Golden Age Sephardic Club, used to host regular tea afternoons with bingo games, and they would sing ballads, and I've recorded them. And some of the recordings are really funny because as the bingo game gets more exciting, the song gets faster and the pitch actually goes up. So they end up singing a tone higher and quite a bit faster at the end of the ballad as they get excited by bingo. But traditionally, as I said, it was sung with domestic tasks, or the young girls would sing it while they were swinging on the columpio or the matesha in their inner courtyard. And some are associated with weddings or laments. And these are just some of the people who sang romances for me. This is at the bingo club many years ago, 1981, so close to 40 years ago. So a romance, for example, that exists on both sides. Landarico in Morocco is Levantóse el rey a cazar un lunes por la mañana y fue a ver a la reina por ver cómo alboreaba. But in Turkey and Bosnia, it has totally different tunes. One of the tunes I'm sure you've heard, it's very common, same words. El rey que mucho madruga, ande la reina se iba, ande la reina se iba. And wedding songs, here's Delacroix again. And this is actually a real Sephardic wedding in Montreal, but they opened it up, this was back in the 90s, to the Jewish public. And they did it as both a real wedding, they actually got married, and also as part of the Sephardic festival week of that year, so everybody could come and rejoice with them. This is the sort of 19th, early 20th century version of that wedding dress with real velvet and embroidered gold. My old group, all much younger than we were. Some of you may have heard my daughter perform at the Skirball a year ago. So here she is in Morocco with me, all dressed up with bride's clothes when she was 8 years old, and here she is recently as she was at the Skirball a year ago. We'll hear a little bit. I just wanted to tell you a bit about rhythmic patterns. So in Morocco, and this is a hand-painted henna drum from Morocco. I got it in my favorite town of Larache a few years ago. You're only going to hear Moroccan rhythms. So that wedding song Underneath the Lemon Tree that I sang for you at the beginning would have a standard Moroccan rhythm. Again, the songs would just go on and on, one song after another with no break. But in the Ottoman Empire, they would either use 2/4 rhythms, just standard 2/4, a signora novia, or local rhythms from Bulgaria and Turkey and Bosnia in either 7, like the La Comida that you all know, 1 2 1 2 1 2 3, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, La Comida la mañana la tarde la traigo atrás, or 9, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. Estas casas tan hermosas, estas casas tan hermosas, etc., etc. So the Moroccan ones, I said, always use that same Moroccan wedding rhythm, and they go in cycles. So what happens is you would parade the bride through the streets at night, and she wouldn't be dancing like this bride here in Toronto. She would have her head modestly cast down, because it was bad luck to cross a gaze with a man who was not your husband in that liminal, that threshold position when you weren't single and you weren't married. You were just on the cusp of being a married woman. And so during those 24, 26 or so hours, it was bad luck to look at a man directly, unless he was your father, your brother, whatever, that's fine, until you saw your husband. And after that, you could go back to work in the department store or be a teacher again or whatever it was you did. So traditionally, she would have her head down modestly, and also that headdress weighed a ton. And her mother and father or her guardians would hold her by her elbows. They'd guide her by the elbows so she wouldn't stumble. And there'd be candles, and the paitanim would be singing, and men would be playing instruments, and women would be playing frame drums and doing the and they still do this kind of wedding procession, the Muslims in Morocco, all the time. It's the same procession, the same idea. It's just a different religion. So you get to the bride's house, and to bring her out, you bring the bride to the groom's house, and the groom's men come out of the house, and they sing, "Give us the bride. If you don't give us the bride, we'll have recourse to the law. Daimos a la novia que por ella venimos. Si no mos la dais, a la ley volveremos." And then everybody would burst into the Hebrew piyut, Ya alat hen, everybody. Men, women, everyone. Ya alat hen alma, and so on. And the songs, as I said, there are songs for the dowry, for preparing the trousseau, for coming out of the mikveh. There were really songs for every single step of the wedding. And other parts of the life cycle, there's not a lot in Ladino, they're mostly in Hebrew. So this one says, get up, new father. It's time for the Brit Milah, it's time for the circumcision, the Kahal, the community is waiting for you. All very nice up to then. And then it says, the woman who gives birth to a boy should eat really good food, and the woman who gives birth to a girl should just have skinny sardines and go argue with the neighbors. Not very encouraging. Levantaos el marido, desde dormido, el cajal está en la puerta, and so on. This is a Piyut Elohim Hai, which is sung at the birth, or like when you know that the birth has been a successful, healthy birth. This is Sali Levi in our group in Jerineldo. He passed away in April, not of COVID, of a long, lengthy illness. So this is our group. We recorded this many years ago. I think I'm playing Darbuka, and Charlie Edri, who is Moroccan, Berber, Israeli, Canadian, Jewish, is playing violin. Just going to move it on to the singing for time's sake. And so on. I mean, it's just great stuff. We learned a lot from Sali. And Henriette Azen, this is an indecha or a lament, but I'm not going to play it because it's considered bad luck to sing these laments on a day that you're not lamenting. So we'll just leave it. And I just put it together some photos from Morocco and Montreal and Toronto so you could see how close these Jewish and Muslim wedding customs really are. So this is Larache, El Araish, the town I keep talking about. There's no more Jews there, but it was a central Jewish town up until about 30 years ago, really. My hand, this is my hand after she painted it with henna. And this is her, and the next town over, no, it's the same town, sorry, the next house over, painting the bride's foot with henna. And this is in Toronto, Noam Sienna, who many of you have heard lecture, the brilliant young scholar Noam Sienna, doing Our Hands with Henna before a concert. This is the bride in Morocco, in Larache. You don't see her face because it's under the veil. And this is the next day with her husband when she's married and they're sitting on the special throne. The same way the Jews do. These are both Jewish weddings with the bride on the throne and her husband next to her, carrying the bride through the streets. This is the Jewish bride. This is the Muslim bride. This is me at one of the Moroccan weddings where the women thought I didn't have a nice enough dress, so they gave me one. And I couldn't film much because they made me dance. And the cow is a custom that was shared by the Jews and the Muslims. You dressed up the cow that was going to be the banquet the next night. You dressed up that cow with ribbons and flowers and beautiful cloths and paraded the cow through the streets, and then it became the main part of the banquet. So that hasn't changed. The Muslims still do it, and the Jews did do it. Calendar cycle or paraliturgical songs. This is the old Haim Pinto synagogue. Mimuna, you've probably heard of. This is when after Pesach, you bring out all the food that you can't have during Pesach, anything that rises, not only bread and not only yeast, but anything, beans, meringues, whatever actually rises. And typically, and this happened here in this house in Tangier, this is 1992, one of your Muslim neighbors would come and bring fresh bread to the house because in the old days before there were bakeries, the women wouldn't have had time to make bread before sundown on the last day of Pesach. So their Muslim neighbors would come and bring it, and they would stay and they would sing. And in fact, that happened at this event here. The Bibhilu at Pesach is singing, and so we came out of Egypt, and the man of the house passes the Seder tray, the Seder plate, over everybody's head, and everyone sings, Bibhilu yasanu mi Mitzrayim. Any number of paraliturgical songs. This one is interesting because it's a poetic device. You take the Hebrew and you translate it into Ladino in a way that reflects the pronunciation of the Hebrew vowels and still means the same thing. So, Ye viene el Shem Nora la redención, ya viene el Señor a la remisión. So it was a poetic device going back to the Middle Ages, which Sephardic poets really enjoyed doing.
Ya viene el Señor de la remisión, ya viene el Señor de la remisión, a decir a todos, vámonos a Sion, ya viene el Shem Nora la redención.
Okay. And this is, I thought you might like to hear this because you heard a different Ein Keloheinu with Joe Amar just before, and this is an Ein Keloheinu from an old recording, not mine, in the south of Morocco, in the Berber area. It's great. It's one of the best Ein Keloheinus. If you weren't dancing before, you'll be dancing now, I think. So it's wonderful stuff. And Rabbi David Buzaglo was one of the most famous rabbis in terms of his singing. This is him doing Et Sha'arei Ratzon. And Mipiel is another macaronic two-language songs. So this is us at our last concert all together, Jerry Neldo, before Sally got sick. And it's 3 generations. So you have the original Jerry Neldo and my daughter and Sally's grandson. So we were all singing Mipiel together in a combination of Ladino and Hebrew. And I just wanted to tell you this little anecdote. I learned who Michael Jackson was at a Moroccan Purim party in Montreal when a 2-year-old was dressed up as Michael Jackson and won the costume party for Purim, and I didn't know who Michael Jackson was. So they thought it was pretty funny that a Canadian had to learn that from Moroccan immigrants. So any number of wonderful songs. Probably Purim has the most songs in Haketiya or Ladino. The other songs are mostly in Hebrew for the other holidays, but Purim really has quite a number of songs. But we'll move on. The Hilulah is a pilgrimage to the tomb of a rabbi or another righteous person, usually a rabbi, and it parallels local Muslim customs where they visit the tomb of the saints. So each town has one or more associated with it. The only woman in Jewish Moroccan tradition is Sol Hachuel, Lala Solika, and in Muslim tradition, Lala Menana of the town of Larache. So I taught this Hilulah song here to these young women of the ensemble Lala Menana, so they're Muslim, and we did the concert in the only church left of Larache. It was very exciting. There were people crying. There were older people, older Muslim people. There were no other Jews there except me. Well, and Andrea Zulay was there. And there were people with tears in their eyes saying this is how it used to be, with people singing together and getting along together, and you know, that brought it back to them. It was a real honor to be able to do that. So the way it works is you name the town and you say, where are you going? Yitzhak, I'm going to, and he names the town. So up in the right-hand corner, for example, to Wezan to pray at the tomb of Amran ben Diwan. And it just goes on like that. ¿Y a dónde vais, Señor Yitzhak? Que nos vamos para Wezan, para zorear, Arbi Amran ben Diwan, su nembración, dimos ir de bendición, and so on. And Sol Hachuel, this is a true story. She was a young girl. She wasn't actually from Fez. She died in Fez. She was from Tangier. She was beheaded in 1834 for refusing to convert to Islam and join the governor's harem. The song is very well known. There's plays, there's books, there's even dissertations, and this is actually her tomb in Fez, which I last visited in 2014. Cuando Tara levanta el enredo, sentenciaron a la hermosa Sol y la hicieron juramento falso. en presencia del gobernador. And these miscellaneous songs, the love songs, lyric songs. Again, as I said, the top 10 Ladino hits are not part of Moroccan tradition, except if they learned them later on from recordings. They don't have any problem singing them, but they didn't grow up with them. They learned them later on. Sami al-Maghribi, as I told you, I studied with him for a while. His daughter, who grew up singing with him, founded the Fondation Sami al-Maghribi in Montreal. And here's a Moroccan Muslim and Moroccan Jewish musician playing together, honoring Sami al-Maghribi. Even today, if you go to Morocco, when I go to Morocco, if I say, I studied oud with Sami al-Maghribi, people are in awe, even today. Well, today I didn't go, but last time, 2018, people were in awe. So this is a song I just wanted you to listen to a little bit. It's very funny. It's Sami's own song. So here's a Hazan, a deeply religious man, Moroccan, grew up in Morocco and France, then came to Canada, writing a song in Arabic about the charms of New York City. And it ends, if you listen very carefully, at the very end, he says, New York asimt al-America.
جديدة في كل مكان حتى وصلت وشفت وتساريت نيويورك عاصمة الأمريكا.
This is the Boulevard Pasteur in Tangier, and there's a little song that came up in the 1930s about walking along the boulevard, the girls arm in arm, looking for a boyfriend. So they would go, En estos bulevares de 7 a 8 se quebran las algas buscando al novio. Me vaya a capara, ay va, me vaya a jalala, así va con Nisim, se fueron a fugrear. And I remember, do you remember, Art, you probably remember this, and other people of our generation, do you remember that song, Dominique Nika Nika, from the late 1950s, Ce Sourire? So some of the Moroccan Jews, when they first came to Toronto, one of them wrote a parody of Dominique Nika Nika called Avramico y Davico, and it's all about emigrating to Canada. So they wrote, Abramico y Davico fueron a la emigración, a hacer la petición, and so on. So just to end here, I wanted to just give you a glimpse of some of the reimaginings of medieval Sephardic life in Spain. So all these are just non-Jewish Spaniards' ideas of what medieval Jewish life should have looked like in Spain. This is the Inquisition comic book, which very few people have print copies of anymore. It's 1995, and I have one of the very few copies of it. This is me and my daughter doing participant observation, as we say in anthropology, in a so-called fake medieval Sephardic wedding in the Ribadavia. And just to give you an idea of how this worked, you see these two guys dressed as a rabbi and a groom? Well, they're married to each other. This is supposed to be a Jewish medieval bride mounted astride on a donkey with improvised chuppah carried by the women, and here's the donkey. Here's a church being made a synagogue for the day, and a place called Hebrew Delicatessen, buy your cheap ham sandwiches here. This is a dress-up of an Inquisition tourist walk in Portugal, where she gave little Inquisition hats to the tourists, and they could read out this sentence to condemn this other young girl to death, and so on. It just goes on and on and on. And I'm just going to end with one slide, which is a transition to next week, because next week you're going to hear Art talking about the crypto Jews, and I will try and sign into that. I actually met Art at a crypto Jewish studies conference, and I've been working with them for the past 25 years or so, the past quarter of a century, as an ethnomusicologist. And there are very few years that I actually have not gone back and spent at least some time with them. And so these are both Jews, crypto Jews, passed away. None of these women are with us anymore. And in Belmonte, this is my family in Belmonte that my daughter and I stayed with many times. These are women up in Trasmontes who were Jewish. All the women who were weavers were Jewish at the time. And these are gitanas, gypsies, who live next door to the Jews and get along with them okay, but they don't have any special cultural or musical or social connection. They get along fine, and they're all good friends of mine and so on. So that's just a little lead into the exciting session you're going to have with Art next week, in which, as I said, I will try and sit in on. So that's it for today. I rushed through it a bit because I know that you don't have very long presentations, and if you have any questions, I'm delighted to take them.
Judith. I opened up the morning with a warm-up with Quando Re Nimrod, because that's probably one of the most popular Ladino songs.
Yes.
I was looking up, and it's also, as you mentioned, most of these are recent. It's like the end of the 19th century.
Well, no, Quando Re Nimrod has a very interesting history. So the actual story is, of course, as old as you like, and there are texts on that story that go back quite far. But that particular song is only from the 1930s. And the person who put together all the research on it is Professor Edwin Serusi, my colleague Edwin, who was given the Israel Prize 2 years ago. He was the first ethnomusicologist ever to be awarded the Israel Prize, and he has a long essay about it and what he discovered in his detective work leading to it. But the long and short of it is that the song itself is only from the 1930s. There are other older texts on the theme, with the story. Oh, and by the way, Edwin also announced last week, and I was part of this work, this was a 10-year project, finally come to fruition, recordings that were found, Jewish recordings that were found from between 1907 and 1912, 1906 and 1912, in the EMI archives in England. And these are recordings from Bosnia, from Sarajevo, from Salonika, from Turkey. 78, all 78 of these lost recordings, never published, have now been published.
Oh.
And, I don't have the link with me, but I can send it to you by email. Edwin's put them all up online. You can download the PDF booklet in English and Hebrew. And it took 10 years, but a huge team headed by Edwin, but with many, many people involved, including me, worked on it, and it's done. 78, many not even known, some not even known before.
I also want to say, I had one bubble burst when you said flamenco really doesn't have any Jewish connection.
No, well, I think about it. The Gitanos, the first gypsies in Spain, don't arrive until about 1440, 1445, okay? In the south, at the time, there were no Jews left anyway. They'd left because of all the pogroms. In the north, there were, of course, still many Jews left. But if you think about it, this is all speculation because there's no written documentation here, but if you think about it, the Jews are in trouble. They know that they're going to be heavily taxed at the very least. They're trying to stay on the good side of, the king and the authorities. They're not going to start making friends with the gypsies who had an undeservedly bad reputation from the time they arrived. It's the last thing they're going to do. But in any case, there was no flamenco yet. They were singing whatever they sang. Flamenco developed much, much later, and it has elements that it shares with Jewish elements for sure. Styles of singing and so on, but it's one of those zebra and the stripes thing. We don't know which came first. We don't know what the Muslims learned from the Jews, what the Jews learned from the Muslims, what the Berbers in Morocco learned from the Persians who had come from Persia, or the Baghdadis who had come from, from Baghdad. We just don't know who taught whom what and how things developed. So flamenco is, it's a conglomeration of a lot of things, but it doesn't really develop as flamenco till the mid to late 19th century. Not to say they weren't singing, not to say they didn't influence each other in one way or another. We just don't know, that's the thing. But the other confusion is a lot of Sephardim started listening to flamenco, either because they lived in Morocco and it was a Spanish protectorate. It was on the radio all the time. There were people coming from just over the Strait of Gibraltar, which is right there. It's nothing. The fast boat today is only half an hour. Or because they lived in Turkey, well, in the Ottoman Empire, they lived in Constantinople or Smyrna, and they got the first recordings coming out, and they also had a lot of performers, touring artists. That's how some of those songs were learned by Sephardim in Turkey. People from Spain would come and sing these, these songs, and they'd pick them up, or they'd translate big hits into Ladino or whatever. So they got interested in flamenco quite early on because flamenco was in vogue in Turkey. and it was in vogue in Morocco in general. But so was Maurice Chevalier, so were French songs, so were Argentinian tangos, and Yiddish music did much the same. It took over tangos and foxtrots and quadrilles and all kinds of things. People share music. The only people who have a real thing about purity of music are scholars. People, what does Jewish liturgy do? It borrows from the cultures all around it. So in Turkey, there's what Edwin Sarusi calls Ottoman Hebrew singing in the synagogue, borrowing on these beautiful, beautiful Ottoman tunes and modes. And in Morocco, it's Andalusian singing. Jewish and Muslim musicians have worked together in Morocco forever. So, but in the sense of flamenco and Sephardic songs, in that sense, no. In a general sense of a lot of connections going on over a lot of time and space, it's, again, like a chicken and eggs.
Anyone else have any questions?
Any other questions?
Unmute and go ahead. Marcella.
I have a question.
I should stop the share so I can see this chat.
With the program that happens in 1391 in Andalusia, do you have a little bit of an understanding of the history behind it?
Yeah, it was the usual thing of people stirring up calumny against the Jews and whipping up fury, and people went out and massacred them in the streets. You can read up on it. It's and it wasn't the only one, but it resulted basically in Andalusia being emptied out of Jews, pretty much.
Because around that time, Italy was going to some kind of renaissance and towards the 1430, 1450s, and seems to be quite a different tradition somehow between Italy and Spain.
Well, there's no such thing as Italy or Spain in the Middle Ages. There's Leon, there's Castile, there's Aragon, there's Andalusia, and there's all these. Italy wasn't united as Italy till what, 1848 or something, the mid-19th century. And even now, if you go into little villages in Italy, the older people don't even speak Italian. The oldest people just speak their local language. They say dialect, but they're not even dialects. They're actually languages. Like Napolitano or what they speak in Puglia, in Salento, is completely incomprehensible if you speak Italian. So to say it was different in Italy from the way it was in Spain in the 14th and 15th centuries doesn't really mean much. You're talking about different social economic classes, different kingdoms, different dukedoms. Venice was not Puglia, Puglia was not Sicily, Valencia was not Galicia, Spain, Aragon was not Andalusia, and so on. You can't really just make those huge statements. You can, but they don't really hold. I see you grinning, Joyce.
Florence and Milan, and France and Aragon, they're all connected somehow because of the aristocracy.
Yeah, well, Aragon ruled parts of Italy for a long time, but the north of Italy was not the same as the south of Italy, and that's a whole other story. I've done some pilot work in the south of Italy, actually, just recently. In the past 3 years, I've done some pilot field work with the emerging Jews who weren't exactly crypto-Jews because they weren't practicing Judaism. But they knew who they were. They knew that they were descended from Jews who had to go underground during the Inquisition because it was the Spanish Inquisition in those parts of southern Italy, but it wasn't in the north of Italy. So it's just too big. You can't talk about, say Florence and Boccaccio and Dante the way you would talk about the south, about Calabria and Sicily. By the way, the earliest Jewish music that we have written down is from Calabria, which is southern Italy, getting toward the toe of the boot. And it's very interesting. It's from the early 12th century, about 1102. And it's actually by a churchman, very highly educated Norman French, Italian, Calabrian churchman, who converted to Judaism when everybody else was converting from Judaism out of fear. He converted, and so did his bishop, along with him, to Judaism. And he became known as Ovadia Hager. And he eventually moved to Egypt. I'm using modern country designations, but he eventually moved to Egypt and became known as a composer of piyutim. And the thing is, because he had been a churchman, he knew, and very highly educated, he knew how to write music notation of what we call Gregorian chant, of plain chant. And the manuscript is amazing because it's from right to left to accommodate the Hebrew. You know, it's a Mi al har chorev he migdi inyan kashav amodi kemoshe, with that little refrain, kemoshe. So the manuscript literally has holes in it where you have to figure out what's doing, and it's not sure how the clef is to be interpreted and so on. That's not my transcription that I sang. It's other scholars who have done the work. But the manuscript is now in Cambridge, and it's part of the Geniza holdings. So you can see it online if you just look up the manuscript of Ovadia Hager. It's actually a very good facsimile scan. A very good scan is online. And between that time, around 1102, and centuries later, we actually don't have Sephardic tunes written down. And that wasn't even Spain, that was Italy. It wasn't even Sephardic. It was, you know, Italy's Jews were not Sephardic in that sense, except the ones who went there from Spain. And he only wrote it down because he was trained by the church. So we don't know if it's a church melody, if he made it up, if it was a Jewish melody he learned. We just don't know anything else about it, except that it's there.
Okay. Thank you.
I could go on and on with questions.
Well, hopefully I'll get back to LA one of these days and we can have coffee and you can ask me all the questions you like, you know?
That was interesting what you said about music notation, because our modern music notation was started by the church in the Middle Ages. So I'm surprised that nothing was done with Jewish music.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting you say that. So when I was doing I did my doctorate in ethnomusicology on Sephardic music, as you know, but before that, I actually did a master's in medieval music. And I looked at music among the Muslim, Christian, and Jewish women of medieval Spain and Portugal. So what I found out, what I learned, is that the Muslims and the Jews, they knew all about writing down music. They chose not to on purpose. Their religious leaders chose not to on purpose because they both said the only music worth writing down was music of worship. And that shouldn't be caged. It should it should pour straight out from your heart and your soul, and it shouldn't be put into like a cage of notation. Whereas the church was obsessed with writing down absolutely everything and making rules about it. And eventually it was, you know, as you said correctly, the church notation went through many, many different stages, and it left the church and was developed by, you know, outside the church as well, and eventually became the notation that we use. The medieval notation is very difficult to read if you don't know how to read it, and often even if you do know how to read it, it's very difficult. But it was a conscious choice by religious leaders, apparently. But no one's found anything. You know, you'd think that among all those highly educated Jewish and Muslim musicians that somebody would have jotted things down on a scrap of parchment. But, you know, you didn't jot things down on a scrap of parchment so much. It was hard. You had to prepare that parchment. It's not like you had scraps of paper, you know, and then you put them in recycling. You had to prepare a quill pen. You had to prepare ink. So like jotting down was not so simple. And there is actually on the back of a receipt in Japan in the 8th century, there's music notation. So it was so common to write that form, I mean, not the same form as now, but that form of early notation in Japan in the 8th century, that people were actually jotting it down, which is crazy. But, you know, in medieval Europe, it was harder. Joyce, you want to unmute yourself, Joyce? Joyce, you have to unmute. There
yes.
you go.
Did you make a reference just a while ago to the Geniza where
I did.
the books were found? This is amazing because I just read a book about the Geniza, the
But did you read the great book, the Sacred Trash?
Yeah. So how that isn't the book that I read, but can you expound a little bit on that Geniza and how they found the lyrics of that song? This is so intriguing. And
the book that I love about it, and there's also a documentary that's been made about it in the past year or two, then you can see the documentary. I can't remember what it's called, but it's very good. It's very well done. But the book is actually not long, and it's very easy to read. It's a lovely book because it was written by a poet and a historian scholar, and a poet who is an expert at translating medieval Hebrew poetry. So Peter Cole, who is the poet and translator, worked with, oh, what's her name? Adina, it'll come to me. But the book is called Sacred Trash, which is, again, like it's one of the best titles I've ever heard, ever.
Sacred Trash, T-R-A-S-H?
Sacred Trash, as in garbage. Sacred Trash, the story of the Cairo Geniza. And the thing is, make a very long story shorter, the idea was originally you could never throw away a Torah when it couldn't be read anymore, when it was so worn and the ink was so, you know, worn out that you couldn't read it. You had to bury it or you had to put it away. And eventually in the Middle Ages, this idea spread to not throwing away anything that was written.
Yes.
Even if it was a bill of sale. So they just kept putting it away and putting it away and putting it away. And these two intrepid Scottish, non-Jewish, wealthy sisters who were travelers around the turn of the 20th century. Long, long story. But basically they found it in Fustat, in what was an old warehouse in a suburb of Cairo, in Fustat. And they contacted Solomon Schechter. And it's a long story. I mean, you'll read the book. It's an amazing story. But eventually, the entire collection got shipped back to England and cataloged.
Cambridge. I understand that Cambridge has over 2,000.
And when I first saw the exhibit, I saw that the first time I saw an exhibit was in Israel many, many years ago at the Israel Museum, like a long, long time ago. And I was just cracking up because not only are there really serious things and poetry and prayers and so on and bills of sale, but the thing that really got me was a letter from a father to his son. And this is in like, you know, the 11th or 12th century or something. And it's saying, oh, my son, I hope you're doing well in your studies and so on. But, you know, you didn't write to your mother. You haven't written to your mother in a long time. Your mother is really wondering about you. And I'm thinking, plus ça change, you know, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Like,
I just want to say, Judith, you are amazing. And I so enjoyed today. You brought back so many memories for me, of course, of Morocco, where I studied belly dancing with Zara in New York. She was from Morocco, and I met her father there in Uli.
Oh, it's super cute. Super cool.
Experience. And I flew to Spain with a flamenco troupe in the day and went with my dance partner, Daniel, to Morocco because his mother was from Morocco. So you brought back so much and I learned so much from you. You are amazing. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce. I mean, I know you, and so when you give a compliment, I know it's a real one. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
But now I miss hanging out with all you guys even more. Got to get back to LA. This whole thing has got to clear up, you know?
I'm waiting for it to clear up also. We want to have
I got to meet you. I have
That's
to.
right. We want to have services with real people. It's not that everybody here online is not real, but you know, in the visible, in the flesh, we can shake hands again. You know, that's what we want to do. And so I want to thank you very much. And this is live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, so you can actually follow the link that we have, and you can share it further with people that you know. You can take that segment.
Yeah, I actually usually don't because I actually don't like my work streaming up online.
Okay.
So.
All right. It's however you want to handle it. It's to yours. And then next week, Arthur Ben-Benisti, and to everybody else. If anybody want to continue chatting, Yoni, I can make you the.
I'm a little under the weather.
Oh, you're under the weather.
But I mean, I guess I could be the narrator.
You want to just lead it for a little bit if anybody wants to join in. Yeah. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer the. I'm going to transfer the hosting. I'm going to stop the recording. That's my backup.